Hi everyone and welcome to our next creator chat. My name is Gabby and today I'm excited to welcome a creator who has developed a series which is out of this world. It's a wonderful middle grade comic book graphic novel called Action Tank. So thanks for joining us today, Mike Barry. Yay.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So the world is a bit topsy-turvy at the moment. How have you been handling self-isolation? Have you been working, creating, just relaxing?
Well, a bit of those, a bit of all of those. I've got two young boys here at home, so two guys under 8. They're pretty active, pretty, a lot of energy. So they keep my wife and I pretty busy. I've been doing some other work too. I do some consulting work and stuff, but yeah, I guess in terms of around comics, I finished my last book a little while ago, so I'm in the process now of planning out the next one. And while I do that, I'm also catching up on reading a lot of graphic novels and comics and stuff that I've wanted to read but just haven't really had time. So, I think there's a good expression like filling the tank, so I definitely felt making my last book that by the time I got to the end, I had emptied the tank. So, I've been reading a lot of as much interesting stuff as I can really to try and, just fire myself up again, get excited about what's possible. And yeah, filling the tank, I think it's a good expression.
Yeah, that's really good. So have you always enjoyed reading comics as a kid? Were you into the comics or just novels, or were you reading just anything?
Yeah, I was pretty into comics and graphic novels when I was a kid. There weren't that many graphic novels around then, to be honest. This was almost centuries ago, but there were a lot of comics that were available just at local newsagents. Or I remember any time we went, on an aeroplane or on a holiday or something, my parents would buy my brother and I. We could go and pick a comic, and then we would just read it over and over and over again on holidays. So I got a lot of good associations with comics. And, I guess when I was younger as well, I just loved all the superhero stuff. I loved all the, particularly Marvel comics. The way it seemed like a lot of the stories weren't just, there was a bit of subtext in a lot of the stories, I think. Like in X-Men, there's a lot of stuff about treatment of minorities or people who are different. And even in stuff like the Avengers and that, there's a lot of interrelational stuff between the characters that I think, is kind of between the lines a bit. So I don't know. I felt a bit as a kid. I felt like I was being having my intelligence respected. Like it's not all spelled out here for you, but there's stuff you can work out if you really want to read these things over and over, which I definitely did. So yeah, I loved comics. I loved Asterix and Tintin. Had all of those. But I think it was Marvel comics that really got me going. And then as I became a teenager, Image Comics launched, and there was a whole sort of political business landscape around that too, which these big Marvel artists quitting Marvel all at once and starting a new company so they could tell their own stories and take ownership of their stories. So I found a lot of that really interesting too. But there was not really an internet back then. So what I knew about that was mainly through what I could scrounge from, comic magazines and my cousin who seemed to know everything, So yeah, I just sort of got into the idea of the industry a little bit as well when I was a kid.
Oh, fun. Yeah, I love working in a junior school. Like Tintin and Asterix are still, to this day, one of our just most loved comics.
That's great.
And yeah, the girls just love them. So it's good to see that they really have longevity in a way. They've hung around and people still love them. So
yeah.
reading.
Sorry, I was just going to say, when I was in high school, I did a couple of years of Latin. I'm not sure why, but a couple of years of Latin. And so now that I'm reading all the Asterix books to my kids again, there's all these Latin jokes in there, which I guess I didn't get the first time. And so I'm really appreciating them more on the second read.
Yeah, sometimes I flick through them at work and like I'm laughing as well, and the girls are like, "What? Like, do you find it funny also?" And I'm like, "Yes, yeah, that it's a book for all. Everyone can access it. It's not
Yep.
just for you." So it always makes me laugh. So reading comic books all your life, was there a main inspiration behind creating Action Tank?
Well, I've got bookshelves worth of comics and trade paperbacks and graphic novels here at the house, and my kids both. We read a lot of stories to my kids, particularly at bedtime. And after a while, they started coming out and looking at the shelf and saying, "Oh, look at that one. Can we read that one?" And so, I'd take it down and I'd sort of start flicking it and I go, "Oh, actually, this probably isn't really appropriate for you." And then, even the ones that even the ones that maybe were more thematically appropriate, I found it a bit hard to read it to the kids or with the kids, or there's just sometimes you open the first page of a comic and it's just word balloons everywhere, and it's a bit overwhelming. So they had a desire to read comics, and I've always wanted to I've made web comics and I've collaborated on a few little things, but I'd actually wanted to make my own book. And so I sort of saw this opportunity, like they want to read something, and no one knows the sort of stories they like better than I do, because I've read them about a million stories and I can see what they respond to. And also I know what I just don't ever want to read again, so sometimes reading the stories to the kids, you're like, okay, well, this one's a bit painful. I'm going to hide it under the bed. So I had all this context for what kind of book would I make if I was going to make a comic for kids? So that kind of got me going. And then, I had a few story ideas, and initially I sort of based it loosely around my eldest son, but it's I deviated from that fairly quickly because I realized if I was writing a story about him, I could never have him make any mistakes or be afraid, or because it's I don't know, that's a bit unfair on him, and it'd be great for everyone else to read except him, so that's sort of not really the point. So I quickly stopped it being about him, and it's just kind of inspired a bit by him, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. That sounds really cool. And getting inspiration and knowing what they like to read really helps with creating something that is accessible to them and that they'll love, hopefully. But they should, because it is really good.
Well, yeah, I mean, I took a lot of inspiration from Dr. Seuss, actually. I really liked reading those over and over, and I felt like they were really clever, great use of language, but also just the way the dialogue and the narration sort of uses the negative space on the page. I just thought, there's a lot I could work with here. I don't necessarily have to make a Dr. Seuss style book, but just in terms of how it was put together, that was actually quite an inspiration as well, I think.
Oh, awesome. And you made this happen with a Kickstarter campaign. How was that process?
So I've actually run 2 Kickstarters now. The first one was for book 1, and the second one was just recently for book 2. So, I've got a career in kind of content and marketing and stuff as well. So I'd always had an interest in running a Kickstarter campaign. I just didn't know what I would run it for. But when I had this book and suddenly I had a book, and I was like, oh, what am I going to do with this, 100-page PDF? I'm going to have to do something. So I thought, well, I want to print it. And then I started researching that, and I was like, well, if I'm going to pay to print it, it actually makes more economic sense to print 1,000 copies rather than 100 or 10, or, I might as well. I put a lot of effort in. So I got all the money. I got all the budget worked out for printing 1,000 of these things at really good quality, and how to get a barcode on it and all that stuff. I found it really interesting, all this stuff. So then suddenly I was like, all right, well, I'm going to have to raise the money to print this. So, and I've always wanted to do a Kickstarter. So then I started planning my first Kickstarter, which realistically was about as much work as the book itself, just in a much shorter space of time. But there's plenty of good resources out there, particularly for comics creators, if they want to make a go of a Kickstarter campaign. So I ran the first one, and I was actually very surprised at the response. And I guess what was exciting about that, Kickstarter is basically like a market test. So you put up something, and if people actually want it, then they will back it, and then it comes to life. If they don't want it, like if they look at it and go, yeah, I don't want it, then, you know, you never make it. So firstly, I guess a successful campaign gave me confidence that I might actually have a good product here. But the other thing was that, yeah, it sort of gives you really, really direct access to, I guess, that first inner circle of fans. And so, yeah, fairly quickly, I've got these people who are sort of investing in the product, but what I realized was they're really investing in me and my success as well. And so from there, that was sort of my inner circle of fans. I guess it sort of started to grow out from there. But, you know, when it was time to make the second book, you know, I guess the first book had done a lot more than I thought it would. It was sort of a hobby project, and then it actually opened up all these opportunities for me and introduced me to the publishing industry, which I knew nothing about before that. But I guess when it came time to do the second book, you know, I guess I'm still interested in doing maybe more traditional publishing at some point. But I'd completed the second book, I'd worked pretty hard on it, and I had a really engaged, you know, core of fans, I guess, who had read the first book, were just hanging on that last page cliffhanger, dying to know what happens. So, yeah, I decided, right, I'm going to go again on Kickstarter, and it was fun, but I have to admit it was a lot harder the second time. My funding goal was bigger, and I think there was expectation from myself, but also from other people, whereas the first time it just came out of nowhere. No one even knew what it was. I barely expected anything to happen. So it was harder work, the second one, but actually just so fulfilling to get, I guess, all these people coming back to get the second book, but also a whole bunch of new people. Yeah, so it is a lot of work, but it's pretty cool. It certainly puts the control with the creator. You know, I think, yeah, I'm sort of interested in marketing products as well. So I sort of find it fun doing the creation of the product, but also the marketing of it. Yeah.
Well, I know myself, I finished the first one and I was like, what is going to happen? Luckily, I didn't have to wait. I already had the second one, so I could keep on reading. But now I finished the second one, I'm like, oh, yeah. now I'm in that position where I have to wait for it.
Yeah, aren't we all? We're all waiting to see what happens.
Yeah. Oh, it was like
this is the current state of book 3 up here. So
yeah. That is a very impressive little storyboard. I like the color.
Oh yeah, well that's the stuff I've worked out. I mean, I've got pages and pages of sketches and diagrams and unintelligible scrawl, but these are the bits that I've managed to nail down so far. So
try and squint and try and read, but
I don't. Zoom, you can get right in there. Spoil it.
I normally wear glasses, so you know it's probably going to be nothing to me. So like developing the storyline, it's not, you know, the story's not set on Earth. Was that challenging in a way?
Well, I guess in some ways the actual story for me in this case is quite easy. I sort of know what I want to happen. I know the big picture, and I know a bunch of fun little bits in the middle that I want to hit. So the overall story, you know, it's fairly straightforward. I think what takes me a lot of time and energy is working out how to then bring that to life, you know, in I guess chapters and then pages and then panels. You know, I spend a lot of time thinking about how am I going to create momentum for this story. Like what I want is an experience where you read the first page and you actually just have to turn that next page, and then you get to the end of the next one, you just have to turn that again. So I sort of want this sense of momentum, especially, you know, for a kid's book, but I think actually just for any book. That's why they say the term page turner. You know, like you want to build to almost a mini cliffhanger at the end of every page turn, so that people just have to turn, you know. And so when I put a page together, I'm sort of always thinking from the page turn moment and working my way back. So anyway, I probably spend way longer on this than most people, I would guess. But I figure, you know, it takes a lot of energy and effort and time and all sorts of other stuff to actually make one of these books. I don't want to, I don't want to phone it in. I want to do my absolute best with every page, every panel, you know, and sometimes that's why it takes me like 5 days to do one page, just sketching it out, you know. Not always. Sometimes I burn through a whole section, but yeah, I think it's all about momentum for me. That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I found that when when I was reading it, it was like, oh, the next thing happened, oh, and then I was excited to find out what happened, and then it really hooked me. And then so by the time I was nearly halfway, like 3/4 of the way finished, I realized, and I was like, oh no, it's nearly over.
Yeah.
And what could possibly happen in the next 40 pages, and then it's
Right.
was endless.
Yeah, well, I think the first book in particular, it's just, you sort of get into it and then it's suddenly over. You know what I mean? It was, in many ways, it was like a proof of concept for me. It was like, because I could have kept going, but I just thought, well, I've gone this far and no one even knows what I'm doing or that I'm doing it, or is it going to succeed? Is anyone going to read it? So I just sort of cut it there. But I realized in the end that book 1 ends up being just a giant ad for book 2, really, because you sort of just got into the whole premise and then suddenly, okay, what's going to happen?
Yeah, it's a nice little like starter novella, just to get you like into the world. You're sort of invested, and then it ends, and you're like, oh no.
Yeah.
Then it makes you want that second one.
Yeah.
Which for
did you find book 2 was a bit more like fulfilling in terms of, I guess, length and story development and stuff, or I'm just interested in what.
Oh yeah, no. When I opened it, I was like, oh, saw that it was it
250 pages?
Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, it goes. It's longest. That means there's more. There's going to be more worlds, maybe new characters, and that's what I was excited to read and see what would happen.
Yeah.
Because when I read the first one, it was really like I liked being introduced into the world and just meeting the characters and what could happen, and then I was super excited to see that it was over double the length and had more of this storyline. Because the cliffhanger at the end of book 1, I was like, oh no, like what is? I was so intrigued to know.
Yeah.
What was that large thing following them? So yeah, it was it really got me in. And what I really liked about the book was the books was the humor and the dialogue between the characters, and I think that's also, it makes it not easier to read, but it sort of hooks you, because that dynamic between the characters is that, do you enjoy creating that relationship between them?
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. It's kind of my favorite part, really, is the dynamics between the characters, and particularly between the boy and Rex. That's sort of, to me, the heart of the whole series. And I think I could just write them basically talking to each other forever. But I'm really conscious again of trying to create that momentum, and so if I'm going to be doing that, then every conversation between the characters, it kind of needs to be doing like more than one thing, So it needs to be about how they relate to one another, but it also needs to be showing maybe the differences between them as they react to the same situation differently. And then it probably also needs to advance the plot fairly quickly as well. And then I suppose as I've been working on the book, I've started to identify, I guess, the themes of what I'm writing about, which I hadn't really thought about that much at the beginning, but it's starting to just come through naturally, I guess. So any conversation between the characters, ideally has some sort of pick up on those themes or some sort of subtext in it. So, but I really enjoy it. I mean, it's sort of, it's not the same as the relationship between my son and I, but, Rex is obviously older and sort of grizzled and rough around the edges like me. And the boy is, just so, I guess, discovering so many things for the first time. So there's like a fun dynamic there, which I definitely see in my own life with the relationship I have with my son. And, I like, as he gets older as well, my boys sort of, their sense of humor really is developing fast. And it's sort of exciting to think that I can write stuff that I find funny, but kids will also find it funny. Like, they sort of just get the jokes, and I think we can underestimate kids at times, but going back to why I love Marvel Comics so much, I didn't feel like I was being underestimated. I felt like I was being respected. So I'm really trying to do that, particularly in the way the characters talk to each other.
Yeah, there was so many times where I actually laughed out loud.
Oh, great. That's good.
Just me sitting in my room just laughing to myself. Because it is so nice reading it, and then that it actually comes off the page, that dialogue and that humor, which is really fun and excellent for a comic.
Oh, thank you very much. It's really nice to hear that.
Yeah. Another thing that I loved is the illustrations and just the colors you use in the background are just, I was caught myself just looking at them because they were just stunning. Do you sketch on paper? Do you work digitally? What's your process with creating the illustrations? Yeah,
sure. Well, yeah, I guess I can't really separate the illustrating from the writing in some ways. So I have plotted everything. It's just in this giant Google Doc, which is incredibly overwhelming. But I guess what I do is I move through that doc and I highlight in a different color the section I'm working on. And then I take that and I work out how many pages is this section going to be across, and then what are those page turn moments that I can hit. And so then I actually just start sketching it out, and I include the letters and the dialogue and the narration, whatever, in those sketches, so that I can sort of get a real sense immediately of, is this working as a page? So I did think to bring. So I've got these little books. They're called thumb books, which I got on some other Kickstarter actually, and I got like 10 of them, which are so good. And you can see, I don't know, let's find a good one. Okay, so here you go. So here's, that's a pretty simple page to look at, but you can see I'm sort of sketching out, the design of the page and the panels. There's a lot of action lines, and it's very sort of sketchy, but you can see that page there translates fairly closely to a double page spread in the book. So I sort of scan this in, and then I go into Photoshop and clean up all the lines, really clean them up because they're pretty loose there. And so I get a full version of the book in black and white. But I guess, what I'm trying to say is, I've basically got a mini version of the book in 7 of these. So I can read through the whole thing, and I can get a feel before I even start drawing it for real. Is the pacing working? Is it making sense? Is it exciting? And I could actually get other people to read this too if I want. I didn't in this case because there were big gaps where I'm like, draw city here, or come up with a funny joke here or whatever. But so I then do all the lines in Photoshop, and then but there's a lot of negative space left because I really want to use the color in an impactful way. So the color is used on many levels, I think, but firstly I use it to try and create a sense of place, where is this happening. So in the first book it was very sort of they're on Pluto, in a tropical section of Pluto. The whole of Pluto is just ice and barren. So there were moments where you switch between this tropical environment and the ice environment, and so that contrast is really impactful, I think. And then in the second book, I wanted to also, they're on a different planet, they're doing different things, they're above ground, they're underground, they're in caves, they're out on, so I just wanted to really play with that color to create space. And then I guess on the second level, I'm sort of using color to convey emotion. So is this a scary moment? Is it an exciting moment? Is it a moment you need to pay attention to? Because then I might just color the whole thing a different color. So I guess trying to experiment a bit with color, not just sort of coloring in, but actually using color as a storytelling device is really important to me. I think if I was ever at the point where I just felt like I was coloring in, then I probably need to reassess what I'm doing with that page.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I love the small books because it really would give you a sense of how the story is going to develop, and then you can change things and work things out. So they're really cool, the little ones, and maybe for you can look at them and then see how far it has come and has developed over the time. So you can look back and They're great, the little books.
Yeah, no, I feel looking at them now again, I feel really attached to them because I just think of all the libraries and cafes and food courts I was sitting in when I was putting them together, and it, just like so many days of months, years of work in these tiny little books. It's just bizarre.
Yeah. It would be, yeah. It would be like, oh, okay. So book 2 just came out. Was it this month? Last month?
Yeah, very April. Yeah.
Oh. So what? You are planning book 3.
Yep.
How long do you think that this will go? Will the boy ever make it home for dinner? Yeah, so planning book 3, do you think it will go on for a while, or what do you, how far do you think the series will develop?
Yeah, I mean, I know where I want the story to end, but I think I've sort of built this world now that, to be honest, from this point, it could go huge or it could just come to a stunning conclusion, So I'm probably still bubbling on that a little bit, to be honest. Again, because it's the second book I've made. I guess it's sort of, just until you actually have it in your hands, I guess, or until I had it in my hands, I just didn't really think about the realities of, what I can now do with this. I mean, I've sort of created an IP, an intellectual property, a world, a bunch of characters, and also it took ages to make this second book. It took like a little over 2 years. Which is, a lot of time, a lot of energy. I love doing it, but, there's a reasonable amount of sacrifice, at least on my wife's behalf. I was, dialing back the paid income a bit and just trying to really put everything I had into this book. So now it's like, well, I guess we can sort of try and finish it really well. But is that going to take another 2 years to make? Like it might. Or should I think of other more interesting ways to do the format? I don't know. So I'm definitely planning, as you can see, I'm planning how it ends, but format-wise, I'm still just thinking about it. I mean, in reality, it probably will just be a third book. I think until now, I've been trying a bunch of different things in the book. Maybe I'll try a few new things in the third one as well. I think if there's any chance it's going to go, I think 250 pages is pretty long for a kid's book, even though it doesn't take that long to read, to be honest. It just feels maybe a little bit like this is a big commitment when you're holding it in your hand. So I wouldn't want to go longer than that. So if maybe there was a way to cut book 3 into 2, maybe I would do that. I really don't know. But I just, I want to get to the ending because it's sort of, the whole thing's been building up to a conclusion, and that's kind of what I want to hit, to fulfill the story.
When it first came out in 2017, it was nominated for Best Graphic Novel of the Year. It's been included in the PRC list. Were you surprised by how much it was received? And
yes, definitely. Like I said, it was basically, I actually have this is the book I did book 1 in. So it's actually only one of these, and takes like 20 minutes to read. I was just, kind of making it for the kids, to be honest, for my kids. And then, as I said, I'd sort of, well, I've gone this far, I might as well see if anyone else wants to read it. And then it was like, okay, I'll run a Kickstarter. And then that went well. And then, I published it and bookshops started stocking it, and then libraries started stocking it. And then, got nominated for that Aurealis Award, which I think that was a huge moment for me because it actually, I'm self-published, right? Which there's still a bit of a stigma around self-publishing, even though, to me, I've discovered it's actually quite an exciting field. And, it sort of taps a lot into the entrepreneurial side of being a creator. But I think the Aurealis Award nomination gave my book a lot of credibility in publishing circles as well, which was helpful because then I got more opportunities out of that, including, going on the Premier's Reading Challenge, which is really cool because in the end, it's kind of why I made it, so kids would read it. And, I loved comics when I was a kid. I wanted this to be a gateway comic for people. So yeah, I was surprised at the response it got and continues to get, but I'm stoked. I'm absolutely thrilled with it. Yeah, I think it also gave me access to other authors and other creators, which I just didn't know any of those people before this. So it's great to be able to talk about process and just the whole experience and, trying to build a creative career, all of that stuff with other authors.
I mean, self-publishing a comic book and graphic novel, did you find that harder, or were people really accepting of it when you first started promoting it?
Yeah, I think my wife and I started working out the tricks. So this is obviously the book. But the production values are pretty good. We got a great printer to do it for us. I'm a designer by trade or whatever, so I know how to put a page together and make it look professional. So I think you'd ring up bookstores or you'd ring up whatever, or you'd just talk about it with people and like, and then you actually show them the book and start flicking it through, and immediately the conversation changed. And then I think that's the same thing that happened when I got that Aurealis nomination. I'd be talking to people like, oh yeah, I self-publish a comic book. They're like, and I'm like, yeah, I got nominated for it. And they're like, all right, let's talk, okay. And the walls come down. So I think what's funny about in Australia, because I've talked to quite a few publishers about this and just about publishing graphic novels in general. Good conversations about it. I think they see it's a huge growing area, especially for middle grade or primary school. But it's a very different production model to what they're used to. If they're doing like chapter books or picture books or something, they've got that whole production process sorted from years and years of doing it. This is actually a reasonably new category in Australia, and so I sometimes got the sense, talking with publishers about this book and showing it to them, that they were a bit like, how would we make that? How do we do this? What do we do with that? So and I think in time it'll catch up, and it'll be all over the place in Australia, because in America it's really taken off, and they're looking for really good projects to develop over there. But I think in Australia we're still just getting the hang of what even is a graphic novel. So the reason I'm enjoying self-publishing is I'm not held up by any of that. I'm sort of I already know what I think a graphic novel is. I know what a good one for kids is, so I'm really trying to push that myself, and sort of carve out a bit of a space. And to be honest, self-publishing has taught my wife and I so much. We didn't know anything about publishing, and so every day we're learning new stuff and making new connections, and it's just so fulfilling when when a new wave of people discover the books, and then you get new discussions about it, and so it is pretty exciting. I don't know if it's harder. I mean, it's just different. It's kind of like running a small business, where you're not just doing the creation, you're also doing the marketing, the promotion, and the distribution.
Yeah, I know in the library that I work at, graphic novels over the last 2 years have become so popular. We have a lot of American authors in our library, because they have embraced it so much that they are coming out quicker, and it's the girls, they just, every time there's a new delivery, the first thing that they want to know is that are there comic books in that box of new books, and can we get them? When is the earliest that we can get them? And then they read them in 2 days, and now they have to wait another 6-7 months for the next one. And I'm like, I can't make it. You've got to either read it slower or. But yeah, we don't have a lot of Australian. We don't have a lot of Australian comic book authors yet in our library, because I haven't found them, but they just don't seem to be as out there as the American authors have been.
Yeah, it's still a really developing area in Australia, and so yeah, I think that's where self-publishing to me means I don't have to wait for the industry to catch up. But hopefully when it does catch up, I'll be ready to be involved.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. Hopefully, it is embraced quickly, and like over the next year or two, that it just sort of booms, because they are such great reads for kids, and they're so accessible for those reluctant readers, but then also those advanced readers that can pick up different meanings in the books. And yeah, they're great. I really strongly want them in all libraries, because they're such a great resource to have for kids.
Yeah, and you know, like visual literacy is a skill as well. You know, and I think being able to, even if you're just starting with looking at the images and being able to work out what's going on, you know, that's a pretty impressive skill to develop when you're a kid. And but I think it's something that, you know, people making comics and graphic novels have to be thinking about. Like, is it just a bunch of talking heads going back and forth, or, you know, are you able to convey at least a sense of what's going on just through the artwork? And I think that's, again, where the colour comes in. You know, if that guy over there is looking a bit stressed out and the whole background's red, then maybe this is an important moment, you know. So so that's part of, like, maybe you don't know what all those words are if you're a kid, but you can say, okay, he's angry about something, so now I know those 3 words. So, you know what I mean? Like, it's sort of, it can be a bit of a detective journey to work out how to read.
Oh yes, I know myself. Over the Christmas break, I read the Watchmen,
Oh yeah,
the Watchmen comics, and it just took me so much time to read, because there's just so much going on the page. Not only the text, but the illustrations just are insane. But I would have to look at everything to know what was going on, because there's so much detail that are in the illustrations that aren't depicted in the conversations that people are having with one another. So
yeah,
it took me some time.
Oh, that's all right. I was just saying, Watchmen's amazing.
Oh yes, it is.
I must have about 15 times. I think it's so good. And I actually just watched the HBO series, which was pretty good. I don't know if you've seen that.
Well, I haven't. So I started it, and then I realized that it was set after the comic book. So then I had to go back and reread the comic books and then make.
Yeah.
Because it had been a while since I had first read the comic, so I was like, oh, there's a few details that I'm missing here.
Yeah.
But then I caught back up, so it's all good. So thank you so much. At the end of these talks, we sort of ask for like 3 books that you've read recently.
Yep.
That you want to talk about, share.
Yeah. I'm pretty lucky, I think. So firstly, having finished Action Tank 2, I've sort of set aside a bit of time to just try and really read heaps of good stuff, immerse myself back in that headspace. And amazingly, as that happened, one of my friends had just watched that Marie Kondo show and started clearing out his extensive graphic novel bookshelf. And so he ended up just giving me literally hundreds of really good graphic novels. So they're just all over the place, and I'm just, you know, diving in and like all sorts of stuff. His tastes are a little different to mine as well, so I'm exposed to all this new stuff. So it's been a really exciting time for me. Also, my library, if I see something, a new graphic novel that I'm interested in reading, I can actually basically request it through the library. They'll order it, and and then they'll just tell me it's ready, and I go and get it, and it's like I've got a brand new book to read. So the Warringah Library Network is really good with graphic novels. But anyway, okay, 3 that I've read recently. I read one called Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me, which is kind of a YA, like young adult thing set in a high school. And it's about this girl who keeps getting her heart broken by someone and just keeps going back for more. So it's kind of, but man, the way it's put together is so good. So the story's awesome, and but the artwork, so it's basically black and white with just a single spot color. So just this pink. And so the way the pink is used to hit certain story moments, or to draw your attention to one thing on the page, or to, you know, help create the feeling in the story. It is so good. It's so good. I'd heard it was good, and then I just didn't think it could be this good, but it was. So Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me. That's pretty good. Second one would be the new X-Men series. I have it here, actually. Yeah. House of X and Powers of X. by this guy called Jonathan Hickman, who I try not to go on too much about because I just love him so much, and I've talked about him at length everywhere, but he's just amazing. I think just reading this, so this is basically rebooting the whole X-Men franchise, but when I say rebooting, that kind of is not really doing this story justice. This is like a massive vision for where the X-Men should be, and you know, after years of X-Men sort of being in a similar place, he's just leapt it to over here, and I think just every page, every panel, like it just feels like he's in such control of the story, and it's taking me somewhere really good, you know. So yeah, love that. Third one, oh yeah. There's a guy called Chris Ware who's been around for a while, but he's got this very distinctive illustration style. You'd probably notice it if you saw it, but he's just put a book out called Rusty Brown, which is about like that thick. So it took me a while, but it's just unbelievable. I mean, it's sort of about such mundane subject matter most of the time, but the way I couldn't believe I was interested. You know, it's such a long book about basically this kid who's getting bullied, or like this girl who doesn't fit in, or this teacher who's, you know, responding to really subtle racism. Like, you know, I guess I actually make it sound pretty interesting there, but you know, it's these long, drawn-out scenes that are kind of really mundane, but the way he designs it and tells the story, like, it's just riveting. So, Rusty Brown is a bit out there, but pretty awesome book.
Okay, well, that's Laura Dean keeps racking up with it. That was already on my list, but now I have more to add on my list, so that's great.
Yeah.
I also want a friend who can just give me a whole bunch of books. That'd be great. But
oh man, it was like, it's the best moments of my life. I couldn't believe it.
I can imagine. I'm like, oh, why my friends aren't that great? And, you know, they're not going to give me things. That's rude of them. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us today. If people want to get in touch with you, are you on the socials?
Yes, I am. I love people getting in touch with me. So first thing you might want to look at is actiontankcomic.com. That's my website. Well, it's the website for the book. There's a lot of stuff there. There's some resources for teachers there as well now, but there's also heaps of backstory about how I made the books, and you know, I keep adding stuff to it all the time. Instagram I really like, so you can find me there at Mike Barry Was Here, and I'm on Twitter. I've been on Twitter for years, but I sort of go in and out of it, but I'm sort of a bit in it at the moment. So, and that's Mike_Barry if you want to find me on Twitter. I guess you can, yeah, there's an Action Tank comic page on Facebook too. I don't love it, but you know, you might. Anyway, I'm out there. So you can find me, and please get in touch with me. I'd love to talk to you about comics, or my comics, or your comics, or anything.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you again. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone. And take care.